Skoda Octavia A7. Another reason why car enthusiasts most often consider a used Octavia with only 1.6 is that it is impossible to buy a robot with this engine. That is, a very conservative choice entails another one, either a classic automatic or a manual transmission. The time-tested automatic transmission Eisen 9GQ&Q, as expected, does not present any surprises in the first 300 km at all and confidently wins the title of the most picky Octavia unit. Even the mechanical transmission, due to its petty pranks, has risen a step lower for some. The rear turns on a little hard, the anther of the left drive bursts every 50 km on machines with 1.4, the release fork damper periodically does not withstand loads and starts to rumble in neutral. There is nothing serious among these weaknesses, but one way or another, this is the case when the manual transmission lost to the automatic transmission, but so far only in unpretentiousness. The resource of both boxes is still a secret. So far, it is only known that with a timely oil change of 300 to 400,000 km, both transmissions can withstand with a bang. I love VAG for freedom of choice. Lots of options. The Germans are trying to adjust each model to the maximum variety of consumers. Probably, for this they are adored by other motorists. With the suspension for the Skoda Octavia A7, it was done very tricky. An obvious fact, the 1.8 engine is preferred by a younger audience, which, in addition to comfort, also appreciates handling, so cars with this engine received a multi-link rear suspension, and all the rest received a modernized, but simple elastic beam. Interestingly, the reliability of the chassis in both cases will be almost the same. Owners sometimes complain about the knocking of the rear shock absorbers, or rather their rods, which require just a regular tightening. Many are unhappy with the rapid loss of ground clearance due to weak springs. The only thing that distinguishes both types of suspension is the cost of a major overhaul when the time for silent blocks of levers comes up. I am glad that this should not happen before 200,000 on the odometer. In front, all Octavias are equipped with a simple McPherson, which, as expected, requires almost no attention to itself. Up to 100 km, only stabilizer struts and bushings and hub bearings usually change. Silent blocks of levers, together with shock absorbers, live a little more than 150,000. The first knocks in the suspension should not be immediately blamed on the suspension. It is better to first check the rubber bands for mounting the radiator. Tears, infections, and allow parts of the cooling system to beat against the metal. They change easily, quickly, and most often under warranty. The disease of the steering racks did not last long for the third-generation Octavia. Almost all cases of early wear of the guide bushing were resolved during the warranty period, and after restyling, such incidents ceased altogether. The big joy for the owners was the brakes. They are praised not only for their sensitivity and efficiency, but also for their incredible wear resistance. For example, the original front pads with a quiet ride live for 80 km. True, just as in the case of the Toyota Camry, the brake discs run a little more, about 100,000 kilometers. This means that it becomes pointless to change the first without the second, and the financial savings on friction clutches are not so obvious. Only temporary resources are saved. What the owners of the Skoda Octavia A7 should definitely not worry about is that corrosion will start to eat the car. The body is galvanized. However, the reverse side of this is the extremely low resistance of the paintwork to chips, which is clearly seen on very fresh cars, which are either strewn with silver dots or have already experienced a secondary color. The front fenders, hood, and doors usually suffer from pebbles. When choosing a used car, these weaknesses should be taken into account so as not to confuse a car after a facelift with a changeling. Octavia liftbacks have a significantly heavier trunk lid than station wagons, so the gas stops in the first case have to be changed more often, especially with heavy use of the rear compartment. It has long been clear that modern cars with complex electronics should not be stuffed with collective farming. Everything is too calculated. Many users of the Octavia A7 burned out on this, trying to stick scorched xenon into the halogen optics, which eventually makes the BCM block also burned, but without quotes and without a chance for a cheap ECU repair. Thanks to the VAG sheep for their concern for safety. For sure, in this way you can partially overcome the blind rats in the oncoming lane. Is it possible to say that by buying a Skoda, you have purchased the same Audi, only cheaper? No. A set of options and trim will remind you all the time that premium was not put here. Nevertheless, it is difficult to find fault with the interior of the Skoda Octavia A7. Everything is well thought out and of good quality. Only those who had the previous generation Octavia are dissatisfied, complaining that the plastic of the predecessor was still softer and, accordingly, the first crickets appeared much later. But alas, this is the auto industry of our time, and such comments are inherent not only to VAG models. But inside nothing breaks. If something worries, then only small things of a cosmetic nature, for example, water spots on fabric chairs, or a contour from a previously installed radar detector on the panel, which disappears only after a week. It is foolish to judge the mileage only by the wear of the steering wheel or the manual transmission lever. Leather wears out very quickly, which sometimes leads owners to a replacement under warranty. Before and in general, the mileage here twisted is very difficult. Even the toughest spotters curbed only VDO dashboards. Those who generally undertake this shameful business do not give any guarantees that the dashboard will not deteriorate and that the mileage will not return back. One way or another, when checking a used car, it is still better to check the mileage. For Octavia, these figures are more important than for the same Corolla. Skoda's mileage is registered in the engine ECU, gearbox, and ABS blocks, but only if the engine is turbocharged and the gearbox is a DSG robot. Otherwise, you will have to study indirect data in the measured groups and check the freeze frames of the errors. And errors in the blocks are registered even from a burned-out license plate lamp. As they say, the one who asks will receive, the one who seeks will find. As you understand, we do not have and cannot have weighty reasons to refuse to buy a used Skoda Octavia A7. A comfortable roomy liftback will make you understand the technique a bit and decide which units to consider the model, and which ones it is better to refuse. Motor 1.2 is the most dangerous choice, especially if the mileage is pulled up to the first 100. It is better to reject this unit even at the beginning of plans to update the fleet. The only unmistakable option is atmospheric 1.6, even with mechanics, even with a gun. As for the remaining turbo engines, I would like to note that the established trends are a little reassuring. Gasoline turbines, as well as pre-selective robots, now require attention less often. The practice of selecting cars suggests that Octavia to this day forces motorists to be conservative. It will not be easy to find a good copy on the used car market for one obvious reason: the model is liquid. Worthy options, especially with the 1.6 CWVA motor, do not stagnate on sale for weeks. Almost always you have to wait for fresh and promptly buy. The new VAG protection against odometer spotters is visible here in all its glory. There are now many 2- and 3-year-old options on the market with a mileage of more than 100,000 kilometers. More than sure, the sellers of these cars would be happy to twist, but they were simply refused and turned down an unjustified price tag. One way or another, you shouldn't really stare at the mileage, especially with turbo units. Still, the quality of service is more important here.